Well, that was it, the mechanic said, wiping his hands on a rag already covered in grease. The tattered patch on his jumpsuit said Eric, though I was fairly certain that he had introduced himself as Todd. A hose blew. Can't even find it. Won't take nothing to replace it. He nodded somberly, then began looking around his cluttered garage. Relief swept through my aching body, and I could see cautious hope radiating from my brothers' faces. We had been traveling for hours at the top of the state, cruising along just fine, when there had been an audible pop, followed by smoke billowing from under the hood. Forced to move on to the shoulder, we had been lucky that a tow truck had happened to be passing by not long after. This far into the woods, cell phone service had been hit or miss. Also luckily, Todd, or Eric, had stayed late at the garage, and it looked like this would be a quick fix. A good thing, too. All three of us found the town itself unsettling. It looked like something straight out of a horror movie. Most of the buildings were shuttered, and all of them looked neglected. It seemed that the only things open here were this garage and one gas station. We hadn't even seen a McDonald's. The only people we had seen were the gaunt mechanic and the tow truck driver, who had hastily departed after depositing our truck and running our credit card. Eric, or Todd, had replaced the hose and was now waiting for the engine to warm up. "So," he said, rocking back on his heels. "You kids heading home?" My older brother, Noah, nodded. "Yes, sir. But we might stop in the next town that has a hotel." Todd turned toward us, the purring engine momentarily forgotten. "Don't. Keep going home." He looked at us gravely with his hollow eyes, from one face to the next, for an uncomfortably long time. Then, as if alerted by some secret signal from the engine, he turned abruptly away and snapped back into action. "Don't want to hang around too long, kids. Harvest time is here." Michael, the youngest, snorted dismissively, the first sound that he had made since we had entered the dirty garage. "Harvest started months ago. We just saw the last of the fall colors." Still under the hood, Eric shook his head. "Nope. Harvest is here. The time to look at colors has passed." He looked over at us. "You kids have stayed too long." After another uncomfortable pause, he ducked out and closed the hood. 25 should be all right." We gathered $35 between all of us, most of the cash that we were carrying. We said our thank yous as we headed toward the truck, eager to put this garage and town well behind us. "What's the town closest to here, sir? We may stop for dinner." Another piercing stare as the mechanic wiped his hands slowly on the dirty rag. I wondered seriously whether we were going to make it out of this garage. "Abbotsford, but I wouldn't recommend stopping. You kids just drive on through." Todd, or Eric, grabbed my arm as I slid into the truck. How did he get there so fast? I jumped and braced myself. He just stood there, clutching my arm and staring with his dead eyes. "Don't stay the night. You just keep on driving now, you hear?" I nodded, not fully trusting myself to speak. He let go. "What the hell was with that guy?" Noah asked as we drove through the town. "No idea, but he gave me the creeps," I said, watching the boarded shops and flaking houses blur past. "This whole place does. The sooner we leave, the better." "We'd better not blow a tire or something on the way out," Michael said, fidgeting with his phone. "No cell service yet." I eyed the decrepit town and its noticeable lack of residents. We'd get murdered. By who? "Maybe Eric, Todd, is the only one that lives here," Michael suggested, his eyes gleaming over a broad grin. As we finally reached the interstate, his grin gave way to a whoop of triumph. "Google Maps is back!" He tapped the screen impatiently. "Dude! Abbotsford is like 2 hours away. Almost to the bridge. I'm starving," he groaned. and tapped some more. Hey, Stockley is only 10 miles down the road. It did not look promising as we pulled off of the highway. The road was closely guarded by trees, as is to be expected this far north. However, following the signs towards Stockley, there seemed to be no break in the trees. They just went on, and it felt as though we were driving farther into the woods rather than toward a town off of the highway. There was not even a gas station close to the exit. Nothing. No stoplights. Just a 2-lane road winding further into the trees. It wasn't even possible to turn around without pulling off to the shoulder and executing a complicated 10-point turnaround. The further we went, the more often we discussed this option, and just as it seemed that we had nearly convinced Noah to turn back, there would be another sign up ahead. Stockley, each one said, with an arrow pointing further on. No mile marker, no indication of how far we had left to travel, just the name and direction. Until finally, with no warning whatsoever, we were driving directly into a town. At this point, I was fully expecting a replica of the town we had just departed, dirty and abandoned. However, as the trees broke into the clearing that was the town of Stockley, our hearts lifted. This was your regular tourist trap town. Everything was clean and bright, signs painted in cheerful primary colors to direct the eye always onward. Cobblestone roads, gift shops on every corner. You just knew that there would be overpriced carvings of woodland animals, and every store would smell pleasantly of handmade soaps, candles, or candies. People were milling around, smiling contentedly, some of them snacking as they walked. There seemed to be some kind of festival going on. As we parked, I thought that I heard church bells in the distance, coming from beyond the town, further in the woods. There were clusters of groups all around the brightly lit shops, and everyone was clearly enjoying themselves. People waved as we walked by, shouting out greetings. In this unbelievable warm and welcoming environment, I felt the chill of the previous town begin to melt away. We decided to find rooms for the night, seeing as how the small town had already exceeded our expectations of what we would find in the forest. This was definitely a vast improvement. We found an inn not far from where we parked. The welcoming area was cozy, and the doorway to the connected tavern was open and inviting. We'd heard shouts and brays of good-natured drunken laughter from within. The innkeeper greeted us as we entered, wiping his hands on his apron. His eyes were warm and sparkling. Garrick Ellery, owner and operator of this humble establishment. And who might you three be? He took our names, but declined to take payment for our rooms up front, insisting that we looked like honest kids. Wander on over to the bar while we prepare your rooms. My wife likes to make the beds up special. He responded with a nudge and a wink when Michael protested that he was only 15. You're on vacation, my lad. Enjoy yourselves. Let the barkeep know that anything you like is on the house tonight. We thanked him and entered the bar. The rowdy group that we had heard from the lobby was also passing through and had decided to stay for the night. Other than this group of 4 friends, the large man behind the bar, and one lone figure in the corner, we had the place pretty much to ourselves. Though there were only 2 choices of drink in the small bar, there appeared to be no wrong choice. A patron had the option of a dark ale, which Noah immediately pronounced delicious, and a cider, which was perfectly sweet and crisp. The drinker was hardly aware that it was a hard cider, which was clearly what was happening to the other group of travelers. Both of these were made right in town, the bartender confessed as he wiped down glasses in a slow, methodical manner. He introduced himself as Hollis. I complimented his town on their ability to produce such amazing drinks. He nodded somberly. Yes, the land provides. Michael was well into his second mug of cider, swiveling on his stool and taking in our surroundings. What does a town like this do in the winter? He wondered aloud. You must not get many people up here after it snows. Not many, Hollis agreed, filling up Noah's mug of ale. It is our quiet time. Yes, but then what does everyone do? Do you still have jobs? We are stewards of this land. That is our job. Michael's brow knitted, another question clearly forming. Just then, Garrick strode into the bar, beaming. "How are we doing, kids?" The travelers at the table raised their mugs unsteadily, cheering our host's hospitality. We joined in the toast from the bar, and Michael gulped at his cider, question forgotten. Garrick bowed and walked over to us. "How do you like our cider?" he asked, motioning to Hollis to fill my half-empty mug. "Very good," I said, watching the serious bartender top off the mug with a polite nod. "I was wondering, is there anywhere in the town still open and serving food?" "If it's dinner you want, then a feast it shall be. We are preparing to celebrate the harvest this evening." "Party!" one of the guys from the table yelled, to the warbling cheers of his companions. "Will there be a bonfire?" shouted another. There was a crash from behind the bar. I turned to look and was met with the intense, furious gaze of the barkeep. "No bonfire," he growled, glaring at the table. "Easy, Hollis," Garrick soothed, holding out his hands. "Of course, there won't be a bonfire." "No fire!" he roared, still fixated on the table. Garrick strode to the center of the bar, placing himself directly in Hollis's line of vision. He clapped his hand together twice, and it was as though a spell had been broken. All eyes that had been fixed on the raging bartender now turned toward the innkeeper. "Now, how about some merriment?" He extended an arm toward the figure in the corner. "Alameda, would you be so kind as to show our guests the way?" Alameda stirred from her place by the window. She was tall and graceful, wrapped in a cloak the colors of fallen leaves. "Yes, sir." Her deep golden eyes regarded us all in turn as she strode by. She did not pause, assured that all would follow. There was a scraping of chairs as the others stood, but I stayed behind a moment, eyeing Hollis. He was breathing heavily, but had not moved. "Will he be all right?" I asked, as Garrick took my shoulder and steered me gently toward the door. "Fine, fine," he assured, escorting me through the lobby. "You just join the others. I'll be along shortly. I just need to see to your rooms." "I thought that your wife was taking special care with our rooms." For a moment, Garrick's brow furrowed. Then the flash of puzzlement was replaced by a warm smile. "Yes, of course. I just need to see to Hollis. Off you go." The town square had transformed since our arrival. It was still clean and bright, but also empty. The rest of our party had not seemed to notice this change, or simply did not care. The altercation in the bar apparently forgotten, they laughed and joked with each other. The four travelers playfully shoved at each other, each trying to be louder than the rest. Alameda, unfazed by this drunken display, merely waited, watching the inn until I had rejoined the group. "Come along," she said, and without further explanation, began stalking toward the woods. We all found ourselves automatically obeying her command, though not without verbalizing our concerns. "Where are we going?" slurred one of the travelers. "To the celebration. It's tradition," Alameda replied as we reached the edge of the trees. "What about dinner?" Michael demanded, suddenly remembering his hunger. "Oh, yes. Dinner is tradition as well." "Where are the others? Everyone that was outside when we got here?" I asked, glancing back toward the town. None of the lights in the shops were on. All of the buildings looked empty. "Already there. Come along." The boys continued to push and shove each other, loudly calling into the trees. Michael noticed things along our path and began reciting bits of information with evident glee. I listened with half an ear as we walked, straining to hear ahead. Why had the entire town moved into the woods? What was with that bizarre display of behavior in the bar? Was Hollis coming up the path behind us now? My head spun as we walked, and I debated whether that partial glass of cider had been too much or not enough. No one else seemed to be concerned in the slightest. Our group fell into a rhythm walking, and Alameda began singing in a sweet, clear voice. I could not make out the words. They sounded like nonsense, yet had a lilt to them that seemed so familiar. The words buzzed around my head, muffling the doubts that had started to creep in. I looked over at my brothers. Michael had ceased his jabbering of random facts, and Noah was plodding along with a dreamy smile on his face. Even the 4 companions had settled, their eyes still hazy with cider as we marched along. Just as it had been when we first came into town, the path through the trees seemed to be endless, right before abruptly winding into a clearing. All of the people from town were here. At the sight of them, my tension melted away. All looked well. Friends joking and laughing, most of them holding red Solo cups. Kids ran around and through the groups, shrieking with glee. It was a wonder that we hadn't heard all of this coming up the path. At the sight of our arrival, a great cheer rose from the assembly, and I felt a wave of welcome embrace me. Still, my brain buzzed with Alameda's song. I noticed that she was motioning us forward, and again we obeyed without thinking. She lined us up, still singing. She stood before us and raised her arms. We did the same. She stopped singing, and for a moment, my head completely cleared. Again I heard the church bells. Closer now than when they had been when we first arrived in town. I noticed that we were on the edge of a pit. Suddenly, Alameda was at my side. I am almost sorry. You seemed rather intelligent. And then there was a rough shove from behind. We landed hard, and a cheer rose from the crowd up above. The pit was large and appeared as well used as the path. I struggled to sit up, reaching for my brothers. I watched in horror as parts of the pit walls appeared to detach themselves from the earth. The cheer from above rose into a roar. Large shapes loomed over us, vaguely human-formed, made of blood-soaked mud, covered in bones and trailing roots behind them. They stumped toward us on legs like tree trunks. The roaring and howling from above converged into one voice. The words made sense now, and still buzzed in my brain like the song. We provide for the land, and the land will provide.